Hello, and welcome to HD in HD. We've got a great guest for you today, the founder and CEO of Robinhood and my friend Vlad Tenev. We talk about Vlad's early life in Washington, D.C., the daily realities of running one of Silicon Valley's hottest tech firms, plus why he gave up drinking and who he thinks should play him in a movie the next time. Let's listen. Hey Vlad, thanks so much for coming, man. Really appreciate it. We know each other since 2018. You founded Robinhood and super excited.
It's great to be here. Yeah. Thanks for still tolerating me as a friend.
Awesome. Dude, let's start 6 years, right? We met in 2018. I actually remember the first thing I thought when I met you.
What was that?
It was that I really wanted to use Robinhood, but I had a KYC issue because I'm Brazilian and I wondered if you can give me tech support. But then I was a little bit shy. I ended up like, let me go to the regular support and see if they can figure this out. And then I remember the first thing that you told me, and this is so true, was that you read a book, I think it was Trump's book or something.
Oh, yeah.
And he said he didn't drink. So you didn't drink and we were at this winery.
Yeah. Ooh, I think you're right. I think I had stopped drinking for about a year at that point.
Maybe until the IPO. I think that's what you told me.
I think there were three things. One of them was that my wife was pregnant, so she wasn't drinking. And, you know, it's kind of lame if I'm having dinner with her, and usually we would have a glass of wine for me to drink by myself. So I was kind of thinking about it too. Then it was January of 2017, right after the Trump inauguration and everything. And I wanted to do a dry January. I also I was reading Trump's book, as you were saying, and in it there was a chapter about, you know, how his brother was an alcoholic and got into all this trouble and how he didn't drink. And then it helped him in all of these business dealings. Like he'd be going out to do some real estate deal and the folks would just be getting trashed. And, you know, he would give people rides home. He would build relationships and it helped him in all of these business dealings. So I figured, well, all these things are aligning, right? Dry January, my wife wasn't drinking. And then I read this thing in Trump's biography, The Art of the Deal, it was called. Pretty interesting book, though I know I hear he didn't write it himself.
But you can think of what you think about Trump, but, you know, he did get elected president. So I mean, I don't know how the not drinking impacted or not.
I mean, it must have helped.
Must have helped,
didn't hurt.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it until IPO. Like, not drink until IPO and then celebrate, you know, with my first drink there. And then actually the day of IPO, I was in New York. Everyone had kind of like flown together for the IPO from the company. And we decided to do it all in New York. And this was at a time when everyone was doing it over Zoom. Like the whole world was happening over Zoom. And so they gave us a choice. Should we just do it from home, from our, you know, bedrooms or offices, or should we go to New York? I did it in New York. And it ended up being kind of lame because I was just in a JP Morgan office doing Zoom calls. Like none of the bankers or investors wanted to come in person. So I was in New York doing Zoom calls. And we had the IPO, which actually wasn't a great day for me at all, to be honest with you. I was like very, very unhappy the day of the IPO. First, our stock went down like 8%. And that was just like, that put a negative spin to everything because you want to celebrate.
Yeah, I wanted to pop,
you're
right?
kind of seeing your stock decrease. And then I could kind of like feel that there was a change in the market. Like there was sort of the euphoria of
when did you guys IPO again? I forgot.
It was July of 2021.
July 21. Oh, so there's still a few months ahead of that of euphoria.
There was a couple of months of euphoria, but you could tell that it was changing. Like people were talking about inflation and all of these things. And it became clear that the rates can't be zero for so long and the government keep printing all of that money, issuing all those treasury bonds. There was change in the air. And partly that was compensated by like crypto euphoria that took a few, like 6 months later to go down as well. But yeah, I was at the bar. This was at the party after the IPO, which was already not a great day. And then someone had gotten me my first drink in 4 years, and it was a rosé or something.
Oh, wine, like rosé wine.
So I took a couple sips of it. I was like, this is terrible. I'm going to go to the bar and order a Greyhound. And I was at the bar ordering a Greyhound, and my wife screaming comes up like in a panic. She's like, Vlad, we've got to go to the emergency room right now. We've got to go back to the hotel and go to the emergency room. My oldest daughter was having a health issue. And so we leave the after party. This was like maybe 30 minutes into it.
Where was the after party?
It was in the Lower East Side in New York.
Like in a bar?
At some event space.
Some event space.
Bar and event space. I forget the name, but it was cool. Yeah. We had a rum ham. So there was like this tradition in our company. Every time there was like a special occasion to celebrate, we would make a rum ham.
Okay.
And we did it for like the approval of our first license by FINRA. Or when we launched crypto and options, we had a rum ham.
Got it.
And the great thing about it is it creates ham rum, which then you can take a shot of. And
you get excited.
It's a bit of a visceral experience.
That would have been a perfect first drink for the IPO.
Yeah. So I didn't even get to the rum ham, right?
Yeah.
I was building up to that. But we run back home. My parents are there, so they come. Everyone's just rushing to the hotel. And then we get an ambulance to meet us at the hotel to take my daughter to the emergency room. And, long story short, not to get into detail, everything was all right. But, we got back at 4 a.m. and just went to sleep. So the whole feeling of the day was kind of mucky. It was like the stock price going down, getting up super early, being on Zoom calls throughout my entire time in New York, and then just my daughter. So at that point, I was like, I'm not a superstitious person. I consider myself a rational person, but if it happened during the first time I was getting a drink, maybe I just shouldn't drink.
Yeah, that's fair. Like I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
And then, so, let's go there this day, right? Like you IPO'd your company, you IPO'd Robinhood, and, it was, amazing, one of the best IPO of the year. I know this was before all this was happening and you were just like going through the motions, like you're kind of remembering like what was going through your mind? Like is it like, wow, I made it? Is like, oh fuck, I hope our stock goes up. Like what was happening in your mind at that time?
Yeah, I felt this fear because we hadn't really built too much in 2020 and 2021. So we had 2 years where we basically didn't launch any products. And even the crypto product, which had been so successful in 2021, didn't have a lot of features. Like we basically launched it in 2018, maybe added a couple of coins, but kind of left it alone because we were in the depths of crypto winter, right? So we didn't even have wallets. And every time anything happened on Robinhood, on Twitter, we'd post something, they would say, oh, where are the wallets? So there was this like huge deafening demand from customers. It felt like they weren't that happy, right? So it was like the crypto business, which generated so much revenue, was not very resourced, a little bit far behind, I felt. Options, we probably had like very, very few, the bare minimum skeleton crew that was needed to support options on it. And that was generating so much of our revenue. And yeah, we didn't really have any lines of business, any new products. The only product we launched in 2021 was IPO access. In those 2 years, that was the most significant thing we launched. Yeah, I just felt like we were fragile as a company, and if the macro environment wasn't as hot, we didn't really have ways to diversify yet.
Yeah.
So I kind of like felt this.
So that was
coming.
on your mind. There was like kind of like this like almost fear.
Yeah, I didn't know that the market would crash as like
hard as it did
at the time. And I guess relative to historical proportions, it wasn't a big crash.
But for tech, it was a huge crash, right? Like for our cohort of companies, it was like a big crash.
Yeah, 75% for that class, I think on average. So it was tough. Fintech got hit
Hammered.
disproportionately. Fintech is like getting destroyed.
Yeah. Yeah. Was it like mixed of like had a lot of happiness, or no? It was like even before all this stuff happened, it was
Yeah.
mostly fear.
I mean, I was obviously happy to like have liquidity or the option of liquidity for that to be easier. That felt like
by the end of the lockup, right?
yeah, yeah. And I sold a little bit in the actual IPO. So it's sort of like
Okay.
it's okay to sell during the IPO, can't sell during the lockup.
Yeah.
And afterward you can like diversify, and I wasn't worried about that. So there was more comfort, I would say. Like I wasn't worried I would be homeless or anything like that, or not be able to afford help or childcare, or have to worry about like renting cars.
All the stuff that allows you to just focus on the company. Kind of
Exactly. Like when I was younger, that was a big part of my time spending figuring out all those logistics and everything. But yeah, that part was nice. But no, otherwise, everything about that entire period was just kind of regrettable for me.
So when you're from Virginia, right? So when you were growing up, do you even know what an IPO was?
I think I figured out what an IPO was by like the mid to late 90s. So maybe I was 10 years old.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. How come?
So I was born in 1987. When I was 10 years old, it was 1997. And that was like the height of the internet boom. It was like pre-bursting of the bubble, right? That was when like, Netscape had gone public, Yahoo had gone public. My family had gotten our first computer. So I was like, I was an only child, and my parents both worked. My dad went to school. So I'd be alone a lot. So I was always on the computer. I found out about IPOs through investing.
Oh, wow.
So like I figured out trading stocks pretty young. And of course, as soon as you find out about trading stocks, you learn about IPOs.
But you found out, meaning you knew what it was, or you were found a way to trading? Like, what did you do?
I found out what it was because a lot of the internet companies were doing IPOs all the time.
Oh,
so you just like see it on the internet.
Huh. Interesting.
I think Yahoo had a big thing on their IPO. If you were like, doing Yahoo chess or something, you saw just all of this stuff.
And how were you like as a kid?
I think my childhood was, there were like lots of different stages to it. I went to school in Bulgaria at first.
That's right.
Yeah. So I did like a couple of schools there, preschool, kindergarten. And then I moved to the US, did kindergarten here. And I was like a kid that didn't know how to speak English, dropped into like English classroom. And, it was near the University of Maryland, Hyattsville, University Park Elementary was my elementary school. And I didn't know English, but I learned pretty quickly. And my parents both worked. So I had to basically walk home by myself to my parents' apartment, which was kind of on a little bit off campus in College Park. Just get off the bus, walk maybe half a mile to our apartment. At first, they would have me go to our neighbor's house and get the key, and she'd let me in. But then at some point, my parents realized, okay, well, this kid's traversing half a mile from the bus stop across the wilderness to get to his house. So maybe we could just give him the key. And so I had my key in my backpack, let myself in, do my homework, go play outside. My parents would come back at like 8 p.m., right? 8:30, really late at night. So that probably defined my childhood, actually, like having to be like very independent. I just imagine doing that to my kids today, and that would be not applicable.
I have the same experience that like I grew up like biking everywhere as a kid and going everywhere and being by myself and crossing streets. So like I don't think I don't have kids yet, but like I don't think I would ever let my kids do any of that stuff, It sounds like.
But back then the vibe was different.
Yeah.
We weren't as protective of our kids.
Yeah.
And I was fine. I got into adventure, but like, yeah, I just felt like I had a lot of responsibility from early on.
How old are you when you're like this?
5.
Oh, wow. Really early on.
Yeah. And, my parents were always like, You have to do really well in school because we might get deported if you don't. And also, like, yeah, you have to do well in school because we're going to need a scholarship to send you to college. I don't think your father and I can do that, right? So there was always like this motivation, like,
Was it easy for
holy
you to get
shit.
through school, or like did you study a lot?
So in kindergarten, I didn't speak English, so it was very difficult for me. But then by like mid first grade, I was good at reading and like far ahead of my class. So they would put me in advanced classes and math as well. And so I think I knew from a pretty early age that I was, more advanced in math and, reading than most of my peers.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I knew I was smarter than the kids around me, mostly in by like first grade.
So it's
And then I
interesting.
considered myself a smart person after that.
And do you think that like positive impacted your life later?
I don't think so, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like I feel like by being branded a smart person, I tried really hard to like seem cool.
Uh-huh.
So I would like worry about what other kids thought of me or how I could be like what it meant to be cool.
So were you cool, or you're just trying to be cool?
I wasn't that cool in middle school.
Uh-huh.
High school, maybe a little cooler, but no, I was still a nerd. No, I was like a nerd that could hang out with the cool people sometimes.
That's the dream, you know?
Yeah.
That's a dream for our kids, you know? Like,
But I wouldn't get invited to like the ragers at someone's house, at the prom king's house after prom or after homecoming.
got it. Got
Yeah.
it, got it.
My friends were all nerds. We played video games. We gamed a lot. We got really into poker.
Do you think if someone asked, like, in your teacher or professors, hey, this is the guy that's gonna, like, IPO a company one day,
My kindergarten teacher,
they would say yes?
Mrs. Saltzman.
Really?
So, mind you, I didn't speak English in this person's class, right? But like my parents always bring this up. They were like, that Mrs. Saltzman, she saw something in you. She said to us one day, one day we'll all be proud of the fact that we knew him.
Yeah, that's crazy. But
So it
then,
was my
like, you're in high
kindergarten.
school, they would be like,
So I was like pretty much the best academically in any of my classes through 8th grade. And then when I got to high school, I was not. Like my high school was very, very advanced, and I met people much smarter than I had ever met before.
oh, wow.
So when I got to high school, I kind of went from being the top of my class to feeling average.
Oh, interesting. Because
Yeah.
they were just a different school that was, like, harder to get in, or?
Yeah, and my middle school was in a private school. I actually had gone to public school my entire life, and my parents felt like the city public school in Northern Virginia was just like
Bad.
not the best place. Yeah, like there were lots of teenage pregnancies and stuff like that, and we, I think they could have made it work, but they were like, oh, why don't we try private school? By that point, they were established. They were like making a decent bit of money, but still had that frugal immigrant mentality. So they weren't spending anything. So they're like, okay, we can shell out a little bit of cash for private education. But that ended up, I think, setting me back a little bit, because when you go to a small private school, they have like one teacher that does math for all of the grades, And so I think you miss out on actually some of the value in the public school system. So,
but then you went to public school, and then there's like a lot of very smart people and
really smart people. I tried to like join the math team for a little bit, but like the people on the math team were insane. And so it was almost like discouraging. I was like, okay, I should focus on something else. I'm never going to be as good as these people. And so I picked up a little bit of
math Olympiads and stuff like that.
Yeah, like the TJ math team was insane. Like a lot of gold medalists in the math Olympiads, and people that ended up starting companies out here. So it was a good, smart community of people. But yeah, like I just did a little bit of everything. In high school, I thought that I wanted to get into biotechnology. That was sort of like where I thought the future was. So I went through that phase. But
Interesting. And then, like, What of that, so far, like going through your child, like what are the things you think you would repeat for your kids, and what are the things like, we'll do a little bit different?
I think like we've got to have high standards for our kids. Like my parents certainly did of me. Like they just assumed that I would do well in school or expend the effort I needed to expend, making sure I did well. They never really emphasized sports or extracurriculars until it was time to like apply to colleges. And they're like, hey, maybe you should think about getting some extracurriculars or something. So that I think is more important. Like it shouldn't just be about academics, but you should make sure that kids do something that's like personal and interesting. And I never got any Legos when I was a kid. I had one Lego, which was this like 80-piece Lego ambulance that uh, I paid for myself and like created my own envelope and put like $18 of coins and dollar bills in the envelope. And I had put it for the mailman to take and get me the Lego, right? And my parents saw this in the mailroom and they were like, oh, the kid like put so much effort in and made this like chicken scratch envelope. We'll just do it. So my parents bought me that Lego, but that was the only Lego I got. So with the one thing with my kids is they can basically have as many Legos as they want. So some of the things are the same. I think high standards is really important for your kids, making them know that like they can't coast
Yeah.
because I worry it's going to be very easy for our kids.
Yeah.
It's going to be very
easy in one
easy.
way, hard in another way, right?
Yeah, I worry it's like things are going to be too easy for our kids, and so they need like they need to know that it's hard, and they need that extra jolt of motivation from something.
Because I remember when I was like a teenager, like I wanted to kind of like, I grew up middle class. I wanted to make money and like, kind of like buy my freedom and like do whatever so bad.
Yeah,
And I was like, I don't know if I would have had like the same motivation were I to be born with like a lot of money. You know what I mean?
was your family
Like middle
middle class,
class. Yeah.
working class?
Yeah, exactly.
What did they do in Brazil?
So my dad was like a factory manager for Ford. So he managed
Oh
like
wow, yeah.
a factory of they have like one of the factories down there. And
How many factory workers in the factory?
he wasn't like the top factory manager. He was like I think there were three. I think he managed like one of them. Maybe his was like a few hundred or something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah. So people, factory workers and stuff. And so he kind of grew from there. And my mom was more academic. It wasn't a lot of money, but she has a PhD. She was a judge, a
Oh wow.
labor judge. Yeah.
And this was in Sao Paulo.
So close to Sao Paulo, 2 hours from Sao Paulo.
Nice.
But like, I have my own story, but like my parents were they didn't have that much money, but they also, what they had, they did not want me to spend at all, and
Yeah.
I was like, I wanted to break free from that so bad. I wanted to like make my own money. It was like so motivating. I can't imagine like, our kids will be like very different than that, right?
I think what's interesting about your story is you came to the US by yourself before your parents, right? Your parents never moved here.
Well, to be fair, I did live here from 2 years when I was a kid, because my dad, well, before managing the factory, he was like a product engineer or something. So he worked in Detroit for 2 years, or in Ann Arbor. So I lived in Ann Arbor for 2 years when I was 4.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You lived in Ann Arbor.
I did.
For 2 years.
2 years, yeah. So I learned English as a kid, which like really helped me, I think that was like so lucky that I did that.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, no, I came for college and everything, but I just remember like I was so motivated, I was like, because I wanted to like get out of Brazil, get out of that reality, like explore the world, see my freedom and stuff like that. What do you think, like for you, like was that a motivator as well, or no, you were like very academic at this point, or like interest in like building, or like what do you think kind of like drove you?
Yeah, that is, you mentioned that you had a lot of intrinsic motivation. Like you yourself wanted to kind of like strike out and have a better life for yourself, right?
Yeah.
I feel like my motivation was too extrinsic at that time.
What does that mean?
Like I was like purely thinking about grades.
Oh, interesting.
And like getting to the next level and excelling in the next level of education. So like getting good grades in middle school so I could go to a good high school, getting good grades in high school so I could go to a great college.
Yeah. It was Stanford your first choice?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got like exactly what you wanted.
Yeah, and I loved Stanford ever since I was 10 years old
Oh, really?
because my parents had, taken me on my first road trip. We decided to go to California and just take a road trip in California. And this was like after we'd been established, like they bought their first house. And they were like, okay, we can take a family vacation that's not back to Bulgaria to see the grandparents. So we did a road trip to California, and uh, we went to San Francisco on the trip, and it was like the shittiest day of the entire road trip. It was raining. It was like 40 degrees. I actually had to buy a leather jacket from Fisherman's Wharf, which I still have. And then I remember going down the 101 and getting to Stanford, and it was 90 degrees, sunny. All the kids and the students were like on the quad, and we went to the quad, and then we stopped by the law school, and I was like, this is where I want to go to school. This place looks amazing.
What is it? So when you got there, was it exactly what you expected?
No, probably not that good at first. I mean, it's hit or miss. I think the weather plays a huge role in it.
Yeah.
But back then when I was 10 years old, I wanted to be a lawyer. So they have this like little out of focus picture of me in front of the Stanford Law School when I was a 10-year-old. So I didn't really have a path of building when I was a little kid. I was just like kind of extrinsically motivated.
Yeah, kind of like
to get grades and go to the next stage.
to that, like kind of excel in that system that you were kind of within at that point.
When you were growing up, did you get good grades? Did you care about that?
So I wasn't that good at school.
Oh, really?
So that was part of it. Yeah. Like for me, it was like, okay, I'm not good at this thing.
Yeah.
So therefore, let me find my thing that I'm good at. And I coded, right? So that was my thing, and then building companies, and that kind of became my path. But like, I'm like very ADHD. So for me, like paying attention in school and like doing tests was like really hard.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was always really good at that, like great at tests.
And for me, it's the opposite. Like I thought I wanted to get into Stanford too, but I didn't have that good grades. So for me, like what went through my head is like, I don't want to go to a harder school. I want to go to an easier school. So it's easier to get good grades. And then my grades are better for Stanford, like,
yeah.
I like almost like the opposite mentality at that point.
Both ways work.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you ask some parents and it's like, is it better to hold your kid back if you can and like have them go into one grade below where you would normally have? So do I hold my kid back and send them to kindergarten in 1 year or now? And the trade-off is like your kid could be bigger than the other kids, right? And so they'll like have an advantage in sports and like organized activities.
That's the Outliers has like a thesis.
Yeah, so you'll have an advantage over other kids. But then there's another school of thought, which I'd say I was more raised in, which was you want to send your kid with the older kids so that they can like learn to advocate for themselves and fight and struggle, and so that it's harder for them, right?
Yeah, I think it also depends on the kid, right? Each kid is like so individual too.
Yeah,
which different approaches might work better, right? For like,
I think that's the truth. Yeah, so that worked for me, but I was an only child, and I didn't, I had nothing to compare it to.
Totally.
I wanted to have younger siblings, actually. Yeah, but my parents, unfortunately, they were like so nervous about the financial situation and the money growing up that they didn't really feel comfortable financially having another kid. Again, it was like fear of being deported and all these things. So
I had one brother, and it definitely helped a lot of that, just like company and like it's also competitive,
Totally.
Yeah.
And you learn to relate to people. I mean, I wouldn't talk to other kids unless it was at school or like playing in the yard.
Yeah.
And after third grade was really good because the other kids that went to my school lived in the same apartment building as us.
Yeah.
So I would be like hanging out with those kids all the time. And that became like brothers almost. But then afterwards we moved like to faraway places.
Did you date in high school?
I dated a little bit in high school, not much though.
Were you like good with girls?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, I could be.
No, but
yeah, in high school I wasn't very successful with girls at all. I had one girlfriend when I was 15.
Like serious For
I mean,
high
like
school, I mean.
it was like an exclusive relationship, and like we were holding hands and kissing
Yeah.
and stuff.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was 15. I think we went to see A Walk to Remember together, so that was our first date.
Oh wow, that's cute. And then so you got to Stanford, and then there was like everything was different, right? Like you had like smart people from all over the world. You're in Silicon Valley, or like how did you change during college?
I thought actually my high school had a higher concentration of really intelligent people than my
Oh
college.
really?
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, my high school was intense. So by the time I got to college, um, academically, I didn't feel like it was harder. I thought it was probably easier on average.
Huh.
But like I had to fend for myself, right? I didn't have my parents around to
Do your laundry and like,
yeah, or like wake me up in the morning. My mom kind of like, it's funny, even when I visit her now, she'll do this. She'll like make sure I'm up in the morning at
the right time.
at the right time. Right. So like in college, I didn't have that. So I would just like sleep through a lot of my classes and I would stay up late because I'm a night owl. So um, I had to learn to fend for myself as a human. That was
And just figure stuff out.
yeah.
And how were you in college? Like what kind of part of Stanford or community did you end up kind of hanging more out? Because then everyone's
yeah.
kind of nerdy.
Let's see. My freshman dorm was awesome. It was this dorm called Otero.
That's what my freshman dorm.
Were you in Otero
Yeah.
too? Was it the Manwich while you were there?
The what?
The Manwich?
No. For me, they called Transportero.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because a lot of people got transport. I guess got too drunk. Yeah.
Oh, well, okay. All right. But not your theme. I'm not talking about your theme, but was it 2 girls' floors with 1 guy floor in between?
No.
Okay, so probably, and was it a freshman dorm?
It was a freshman dorm. Yeah.
Okay, so they got rid of that. So during my time, it was known as the Manwich. So there were twice as many girls in this dorm as guys.
Oh wow.
And it was all freshmen. So it was by far like the best dorm in campus,
Huh.
like by a wide margin. And then they probably realized that it wasn't ideal to have twice as many girls as boys in one dorm. So they, sounds like by your time, disbanded that.
Yeah. No, I think they. When I was there, it was very. Yeah. It was it was all the bathrooms were gender neutral. Everything was mixed.
Oh, it went super woke, right?
Yeah, it went super woke. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which for me, coming from Brazil, that was like very new. Like
Right.
I never seen that in my life.
I missed that entire thing. I think Stanford was woke in the 90s and in the 2010s. And in between, I kind of fell into this place where that was really not emphasized at all.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it's foreign to me too.
Oh no, for me it was like the most distinct thing about Stanford is how woke it was when I was there.
Yeah.
It was
That's
like,
super strange to me.
yeah, it was extremely woke. So okay, so you're in Otero for freshman dorm, and so
Yeah.
that was it was awesome, and that's became your community, your friends.
Yeah, that was one community. Then actually I joined a frat. I joined a frat called Kappa Sig.
Oh, that's that's the good one.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely
My
the
favorite
best frat.
parties at Stanford were Kappa Sig.
Oh, we had the luau.
Eurotrash.
Yeah.
Do you have that?
No, Eurotrash was Sigma Nu, at least at our time.
No, our time was Kappa Sig.
Really?
Yeah.
So they moved.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. Sigma Nu was Eurotrash for us. And then there was Sigma Chi, which was like the only frat to own their own house because John Arriaga, who was like the,
Everything in Stanford is Arriaga.
yeah, he basically has built half of Stanford. He was a Sigma Chi in that house. So he like bought them the house. And so they have a little bit more of a privileged position in a way. And then we had SAE, which was not a very popular frat. Actually, it was very popular, but they lost their house.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
They didn't have a house.
Probably around the time you went there.
Yeah.
So we lost our house for a little bit, but then got it back.
Oh wow. So okay, so you were in a frat, and was that like was it like because I dropped out before I could, otherwise I think I maybe would have, but like were people like super ambitious but still partying a lot? Was it like kind of work hard, play hard, or was it like not that?
There was a mixture of a lot of different types of people. It was a very small proportion of like the really cerebral people that cared about like math, science, and research. It was like the 300 people that would like go out at night and socialize. I think they called them the Stanford 300, maybe still do.
Huh.
Because like there's 300 people that you'd see at parties and events and things like that. So yeah, we would like
Were there
throw
secret
parties.
societies when you were there?
Not really. I think that was maybe a couple, but
I just
it was mostly centered around the frats when I was there.
I met someone that's at Stanford right now, and she told me that there's secret societies now that you get like recruited. And I was like, maybe there were, but they were very, very secret to me. At least.
Yeah, they never recruited me.
I was like, not recruited at all for these things.
Did you ever get rolled out in the middle of the night to do fountain hopping?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did. And I thought it was something very serious when they took me out of bed.
Yeah.
And at this point, did you think you were going to start a company or no? You were like,
no idea. No, I didn't think I would start a company.
What did you think you were going to do?
I thought I would be a researcher.
Really?
Yeah, so I got into Stanford.
Didn't the money bother you? You're like,
didn't even think about it.
Really?
Yeah,
did you like just not think a lot about how much you're gonna make growing up?
I never really cared about money that much, as long as I had a little bit, like enough money to not have to worry about housing or anything like that. Yeah. Growing up, I was like, okay, if I could make $100,000, that would be amazing. Yeah, like hopefully I can find a job
that eventually
will pay me $100,000 a year.
Yeah,
because that just seemed like so much money. What I was motivated by from a very young age was like finding out how the universe worked.
Interesting.
Yeah, like it got me into biology, and then I realized, well, to really understand it, you have to get into fundamental physics. So I would read like A Brief History of Time and The Elegant Universe by Brian Greene. I don't know, you might have read that one. That was like a...
Dude, this is so far from my reality.
It was like a more popular nonfiction audience. It was string theory for like a general audience.
Yeah.
So I read that, and I just really wanted to understand what the rules of the universe were and how it originated, like what happened before the Big Bang. So those were the most interesting questions for me.
So that's spending your time, you thought you were going to just spend a lot of time trying to figure that out, like
exactly.
And answer those important questions.
Doing research, maybe making discoveries in fundamental physics.
So how did you pivot to like now? Oh no, I'm going to go into like not only building companies but like fintech and all, like what was the?
Oh yeah, I'll tell you my thought process there.
Yeah,
I think that was a pretty good one. I graduated from Stanford. It was 2008.
Were you a great GPA, like similarly academically good or no?
I had a slightly lower GPA. Yeah, still pretty good, above average, but not like perfect. Maybe it was like a 3.7 or something.
Yeah.
And I had taken really difficult graduate level math classes. And I applied to a couple of jobs right when I graduated college. And I never
PhD
really made...
as well or no?
I applied to PhDs as well. So I went through that. I took the GRE. I did like mediocrely, I would say. So I applied to a bunch of schools. Mediocre, but like good enough, right? And then I applied to a bunch of jobs, none of which I got. Nobody wanted to hire me when I graduated from Stanford.
How is that possible? Is it because it's 2008? This 2008, you said, right?
2008, before the crash.
So how is it possible? Isn't it like so easy to get a job after Stanford these days?
See, back then, this was before data science. So mathematicians were not very employable.
Really? Even in tech with Google and everything going on? Like,
yeah, I never even got an interview at Google.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, not even a phone screen.
Probably your GPA. They were very annoying about that.
Yeah, it might have been too low. Yeah,
right?
I didn't get 4.0. And I also didn't take any computer science classes, really.
Okay.
I took like the intro class and maybe a computational physics class. But, I didn't have a ton of programming experience, no internships. I had done all of my summers doing research, basically. And yeah, so I didn't get any jobs. So I kind of went to UCLA for grad school by default, and the path of...
For math, right?
For math. And basically the career path there
Graduated in math for undergrad too.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I pivoted from physics to math. I ended up getting a minor in physics. And the basic reason for that is I didn't want to do any of the experimental stuff. I just wanted to do theoretical physics, and that's basically math. So ended up studying math and doing research there. And when I got to grad school, the path was you become a postdoc, and then Uh, if you're lucky, you get a job as an assistant professor. In a couple of years, you have to get tenure. So you become an associate professor, which is tenure track. And then you become a full professor and you have that job security for life. And you get to like think about these ideas. And
Do you watch The Big Bang Theory?
I've seen a couple of episodes, but I never really got into it.
I was curious if it, it's inspired.
I was like, guy, the physics people aren't that annoying and like flamboyant. So I don't know, just it didn't feel accurate to me.
Makes sense.
And really good physics people, you wouldn't make a show about.
That's fair. They're
just like sitting in their offices. They haven't showered in weeks, and they're just like doing physics.
So you're at grad school at UCLA.
I was at grad school in UCLA, and I had bought this book, like The Mathematician's Survival Guide or something. I think it was called The Mathematician's Survival Guide. And it was all about how to survive in grad school and deal with like the bureaucracy of the department and who's the department chair and like what committees you have to be in and how you can make sure you have enough time to do research while still teaching. And then it dawned on me that this was actually a job and that I did not want to have that job.
Makes sense.
So I was looking for something else to do, right? I was like, this is a job. I get paid $18,000 a year, which is what I was making as a grad student. Actually less if you pay the the rent that they subsidize for you. And they were great people there. It was fun. It was basically like another year of college.
Yeah.
And I couldn't imagine doing it for 5 years to get a PhD. And also, I should add, there were some people there that were immigrants, like my parents, who had come from China, right? Or, Korea, but mostly China. And they were doing nothing but do math all the time, 22 hours a day, working super hard. And, I wanted to have a little bit more fun. I enjoyed LA. I went out with my friends. We went to bars. We drank. I was like, I'm never going to outcompete these motherfuckers. I have no advantage doing this. So I need to find another way. So I became an entrepreneur.
But then what was it? What was that? How did that? Because like you're like not caring about money at all in research to like starting a company, So
you know what it was?
You could have gotten like a quant trade,
It was my co-founder, Beju. So he and I met as physics undergrads, actually, at Stanford. And the way we met was we were the only two people in that department that weren't like huge nerds, right?
Yeah.
So we were a little bit more social. We liked hanging out with people. So we became really good friends. We started working out together, going to the gym. Like we would go on drives together. We became really, really close friends. And we switched to the math department at roughly the same time. He was 1 year older than me, so 1 year ahead of me in school. So he graduated and got his master's when I was finishing up school. And so when I went to UCLA to do my math PhD, he decided he was thinking about doing a PhD, but I think didn't get into anywhere he really liked. So he took a job at a small high-frequency trading firm up in Marin County. Small high-frequency trading firm, I had no idea what high-frequency trading was. And I had done a little bit of trading when I was younger. I was telling you, like maybe in my teens around the .com boom, but I didn't know what high-frequency trading was. And the more I learned about it, the more I became fascinated by the problem. And the problem was basically like, how do you build a system that can make money in the stock market reliably with as little risk as possible, right? I don't want to have to be smart and predict the prices of things. I just want to take advantage of inefficiencies in the market. And if like the same thing is trading at two different prices, make free money at as little risk as possible. So yeah, I thought that problem was just fascinating. Almost in the same way that like finding the origin of the universe is fascinating. So I got really into this problem, and me, Beju, and this other trader had partnered together, but we were kind of thinking about what to do. Like, how do we make a machine that makes money? And so I became an entrepreneur to start that first company. It was called Solaris Trading, and it was basically building high frequency trading systems for US equities. I don't know if this is interesting, but I could probably describe how we figured out to make money
So it did make
relatively
money.
quickly. It made a small amount of money
Yeah, what was the
very consistently, but frankly, not enough to cover like
expenses?
Yeah.
But
like
even if you
data center space, which we were spending a lot on, and like real salaries to the team members. We basically had investors that put about $250,000 into it, which by now seems laughable. At that point, it was like $250,000.
What was the first algorithm that worked?
The first algorithm. So first of all, here's how you do it without taking zero risk. Your system has to be really fast. So the latency of the system, which you measure by tick to trade. Tick is when you get a signal that comes in from a market data feed or some other signal that changes the pricing of all of the assets, to then you create an order and you send it out to the exchange programmatically, and that's the trade time. So the goal was to minimize the tick to trade latency and get it to like at first 1 millisecond, but eventually we ended up getting it to like dozens of microseconds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it has to be really fast. That way you don't have to know anything, but you can take advantage of basic mispricings to make money. And the mispricing we found was between an ETF and its basket components. So you're familiar with ETFs, right? Yeah. So yeah, we would basically calculate what the liquidation value was of an ETF, like the theoretical value, because an ETF is a component of companies usually.
Yeah.
So all of those companies are publicly traded. So you can look at their prices and look at the price of the ETF, compute what the price of the ETF should be based on
so
what weightings it has.
the sum of all the assets of the ETFs owns at that moment, is that the same if you were to buy all those assets in the market at that
Exactly. And it's never the same. Usually it's off by a little bit.
And then you can arbitrate it.
Exactly. You can just buy whatever's cheaper, either the ETF or the basket, and sell the more expensive thing.
But why couldn't you just like scale it up with like more money and make more money?
I mean, we basically were making markets on hundreds of ETFs. Yeah, at the peak. We had scaled it pretty well.
Oh, wow.
It was making a fairly small amount of money. And what gets you is like the operational risk, right? Like you make a lot of money precisely when markets are most volatile.
Yeah.
And weird shit operationally happens when markets are volatile. Like they'll halt symbols or they'll reverse trades. Trades will break. And then you end up having sort of like an extra risk exposure at the times that are most profitable.
And what was your exact role, like, in this one? Not title, but like, what was the part that you were like really good at?
Yeah, I was doing all of the engineering.
Coding.
Yeah.
So now
coding
you
a lot.
code.
Pretty much all the engineering. My co-founder Beju did some of the engineering as well. He was more quantitative, so he was like the quant. And then our third partner was the trader.
And you were like more building it kind of.
Exactly. Yeah. But the algorithm was ETF basket arb. So like this algorithm wasn't very quantitative.
Yeah.
It's a pure arb algorithm. But we always had plans to like scale it and make it a little bit more quantitative.
And then you guys couldn't figure out the next one. That's why I shut down, or?
I think what happened there was we actually ran into people. So we had moved to New York by this time. So I had taken a leave of absence from UCLA to start this business. Beju had left his job at the high frequency firm in Marin County. And we drove across the country to New York. And we found some investors there. And they were sort of like friends of our third partner. We felt, and I think the investors also felt pretty strongly, that if we're trading in New York and all the machines that you're racking are going to be in New Jersey, and so much of the time is going to be spent optimizing the equipment in the data center, we should just be in New York. So we did that. We moved to New York. We lived in Staten Island for a little bit, where one of our investors had a house, and so we were kind of squatting for free. Then we moved into the East Village. We had maybe like 250,000 of invested capital. And what happened was, as we got into the community, Like we would go to some events, we would do business with people because we always needed this like state of the art hardware. We would need like low latency switches and like network cards that were super efficient and could bypass the kernel to really quickly transmit data. So then we went to all these people that were making all this equipment and they connected us to the other hedge funds and things like that. And so pretty soon we found that there was a lot of interest in the software that we were building to trade our own algorithms. We talked to a lot of finance people that were doing pretty primitive strategies, trading by hand, trading manually. So we found that people were like interested in our technology and they wanted to license it. So then we thought about like that being an attractive opportunity. We're like, wow, we don't have much money. We basically like we have this technology. Someone's willing to pay us for it. I think we were like, we got into this discussion where they were like, we really want it. How much would you pay for it? And we are like, we don't want to sell it. We'll license it to you. We had negotiated like $20,000 a month, which was a huge amount for that technology. And at first, we started another business, Solaris Technologies,
just to do this,
to commercialize the software. It was me, Beju, a couple of engineers that were helping us build it. And what we were working on was trading algorithms by day and like technology by night. So I basically had two jobs.
Which, I mean, you were also the customer of the other one, right? Like you're kind of like your own customer.
Exactly. But like,
but isn't it kind of like Citadel works? Like they do their own stuff, but they also do the stuff like market making and they have their own trading. And
in a way that's true. They don't have customers of their technology directly. No one's like licensing their trading algorithms.
I'm saying they market make and they have prop trading, right? They do.
Yeah. I mean, that Citadel is a much larger operation than what we were doing. It was like me and Beju and two engineers trying to like essentially operate two businesses that were like very, very different, right?
Yeah.
Very different businesses. So at one point we were like, okay, we should stop trading our own money,
and just
we should stop being a prop firm. And frankly, like we weren't very good at that. We weren't sleeping. That was the problem. Basically, we were up while the markets were open, like monitoring the trading systems and making changes. That was from like 9 to 4. Then I would sleep for a couple of hours and work on the technology from 9 p.m. to 4 a.m. So at some point you have to like, everyone tells you this, but until you go through with it, I don't think you start to believe it. You've got to just focus on one thing at a time. That's like very hard. It's hard enough to do multiple things at that stage.
Yeah, makes sense. So then you focus on the technology, but
yeah. And we built that business up. It got up to maybe a couple million in revenue. We had 10 engineers, all bootstrapped. At that point, raising money from venture capitalists was like
what year is this?
This was 2010.
Okay.
We decide that we weren't getting any great engineers in New York. Back then, the tech talent was very different there, as I'm sure you understand. So we were basically recruiting at Stanford and trying to get the people that we were hiring to move across the country to Bushwick, which is where we had our office. And, that was very hard. So I decided to create, with, our team and Beju at the time, we were discussing creating a San Francisco office. Let's get closer. We'll have like engineering and development being in San Francisco and sales and business basically in New York. And still, we hadn't raised any capital. This was completely bootstrapped at that point. And then we had this month in, I want to say 2012, when a large portion of our customers went out of business. 2 out of our 3 customers or something. They were like cutting expenses. They cut the technology. And so, it was clear that a lot more had to be done to make that a successful business. We probably could have grown it to 10 million in revenue, but it would have been hard, right? We wanted to do something else. We wanted to pivot away from it. And we got this idea because I was in San Francisco at a party, like college, like ex-college friends, but also like new people from the tech scene. So it was this party in San Francisco, 2012. And I think I was talking to someone that we were interested in maybe hiring for the software business. Kronos Research, by the way, was what the software business was called at the time. We had kind of started a new one. So it was no longer Solaris, but Kronos Research. And I was explaining, like, we have this technology. It can allow customers to place trades really quickly. It was super fast, low latency, and you can place millions of trades a day for basically a monthly subscription fee. And this guy was like, I don't understand anything about this technology. He worked at Zynga, I think, but you're telling me you can place millions of trades a day for basically no cost. I was like, yeah, you can place close to zero, right? Why am I paying $15 for every trade in my Schwab account? Can I use your technology? He was like, can I just use it? I was like, oh no, that's ridiculous. This is like a product for hedge funds and large teams and banks. But then I thought about it and I was like, shit, he's right. Like, people are paying $10 to $15 a trade every single time. And we have this technology that can basically deliver it for zero really efficiently with like zero people necessary. That's the product. And like, that's the market we should go after. There's so many people that are paying so much money unnecessarily. The margins are so fat. And so we were also really big Steve Jobs fans. Like, the iPhone came out when I was in college, and Beju and I kind of bonded over that. We would watch the keynotes and everything. And then when we were in New York building the software business, I remember we watched the iPad announcement. And in this announcement, Steve Jobs kind of like sits down on this couch, and in front of everyone, he's just playing with the iPad, just kind of browsing around. And it was pretty magical to watch. And at that point, I realized that I knew that I wanted to launch a consumer product. So like, the enterprise stuff was not very interesting to me. So when we got this idea of
and just at this point, like, was your role model Steve Jobs? Like, I want to be like Steve Jobs. Like, research is in the past, trading is in the past. Like, I'm an entrepreneur, or not yet?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think so.
yeah. This is already like fully formed. Like, I want to be an entrepreneur.
I think by that point, yes. So after 1 year of running the trading business and the technology business, it became clear to me that I didn't want to be like a research mathematician. We weren't even that successful at the time. Like, we ended up losing our investors' money, basically. I mean, spending it through our burn. And we had to shut down the trading venture, of course. And we focused on the software venture, but we weren't that successful at all at that point. We basically didn't have any, we were paying our rent, and that was pretty much it. But
and then and you didn't like, and at this point, like, did your relationship with money change at all, or still kind of like the same? I mean, you obviously want to build a business, but like, it was still, hey, I can get rent, I can get by, it's fine.
No, at this point, like, I was raised very immigrant mentality. You don't pay for anything that you can do yourself. So my parents, up until like a few years ago, never even had a housekeeper. I still don't think they have one, actually. My mom would insist on like doing all of that herself, and we would have chores. Like, Sunday, I would do the vacuum cleaner.
Yeah.
Sometimes I would wash the dishes.
So still, like, you wanted to build a consumer product, you wanted to be an entrepreneur, but it was still like, clear immigrant mentality. Like,
Totally.
Yeah.
Like, I drove my car in New York because I didn't want to pay for all the subway tickets, and I didn't want to pay for parking. So every, Tuesday, there was this community of New Yorkers that lived in our neighborhood that would get out and like move their car for the street cleaning and like wait for the street cleaner to come down and park right afterwards. So there was this like morning ritual just to make sure you get a good spot. So yeah, I would spend like multiple hours per week just worrying about, like moving my car. Yeah. So I think the great thing about money for me is it's been helpful to like remove all of those things.
Yeah, all the
so I don't have to worry about parking my car. I mean, that saves hours a week. Can you imagine having hours extra per week? I don't like having a commute. I mean, sometimes I like driving, right? So,
Yeah,
but
not
I
for
don't want it
like
to be like a huge
commute.
commute where I'm stop and go the entire time.
And it's very interesting that you say that because like once you described, I don't know if you described this like this to me, but like the Robinhood, you think a little bit as like kind of Costco, but like financial services a little bit. Did you ever say that to me?
Yeah, I think that Costco is not the perfect example. Um, I like certain things about Costco, but I think we want to position Robinhood as like more luxurious than that.
Uh huh.
Like, a Costco membership, I think, has this more utilitarian branding. You don't associate luxury with Costco, even though they have luxurious products, like they sell diamonds and they're selling gold bars now at really competitive prices. Um, but yeah, we wanted to feel a little bit more elevated than that, particularly Robinhood Gold. And so Robinhood Gold as a brand really should be like private wealth management for a low cost. So simultaneously luxurious, but also available to everyone. More like the iPhone. I think the iPhone's a great example. Luxury product, but they've sold billions of them,
Yeah,
like
but
billions.
iPhone was very expensive when it came out, right? In
Yeah,
comparison to all the versus Robinhood Gold is very good cost for value, right?
exactly. I mean, the iPhone was expensive, but like, if you get a subscription to it, maybe it's $30 a month through your
Yeah.
carrier. So it's not wildly different.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know, and the reason I bring it up is more because like I just wonder kind of what came first, like you were or if there's any relation, like you were kind of like a frugal guy or parents frugal immigrant mentality,
Yeah.
and then Robin Hood being like, something that also was about getting good value. Even if you had a lot of money and you're trading millions or tens of millions or billions, like you can still have like good value.
I think that I've always been naturally drawn to products where the transaction cost is as low as possible. Because when we started doing high frequency trading, it was all about getting your transaction costs and the latencies to as close to zero as possible so that you had like the most flexibility about how to trade that you possibly could have. And so I think obviously a commission gets in the way of that. It's not only like inefficient, but it costs you money. So yeah, I like the idea of like eliminating it wherever possible and offering the service at the lowest possible margin and getting a large amount of it where you can start benefiting from scale economies. Like it just seemed like an elegant business. So that's why we've always wanted to cut transaction fees to as close to zero. It's almost like ideological for us.
Yeah, in the beginning, so this guy told you thought about the idea, and did it seem like an obvious idea to you back then, or was it like because for what I heard in your seed round, that was not the case, right?
Yeah,
Like,
it seemed like an obvious idea to me. Yeah, it seemed like an obvious idea to me. Yeah, it was difficult. Eventually, we figured out that we should probably raise some venture capital money. It was a little bit taboo at the time. Like people just assumed venture capitalists were like these money grubbers that would take your money and
who
steal
would
your
people?
company. Like that was like the conventional wisdom among entrepreneurs at the
That's
time.
2010.
2010, yeah, it was largely the case.
I thought it
Yeah,
was already like Salesforces and Google and blah blah. Wasn't this already like huge success cases, and people were like,
yeah, but also the social network had come out. I think it was like the social network,
uh,
and then like that was just the vibe around VCs. Like they
yeah,
would like take control from you, and in all of the lore, it was like Apple had done that, right? They fired Steve Jobs, and
yeah,
VCs took over the company. Um, or the president, they forced you to bring in Google, the founders stepped
yeah.
down at that time. Eric Schmidt was running the company.
Did you watch the Social Network?
I did see
But
it,
when
yeah.
it came out,
I watched it
what
in
do you think?
theaters. I thought it was pretty entertaining.
Did it
Yeah.
inspire you, or like were you after watching? You was like, oh, like this is
I
dope,
think
or
it was
like?
better than Dumb Money
I was gonna
as
ask,
a
like,
movie.
would you think you'd have your own movie one day? Like,
Yeah, I think that was a little annoying, to be honest. It was very eerie. It was like have you seen that Black Mirror episode where like this woman, I think she's working at some agency, comes home and she opens up Netflix, and it's basically a reality show of her life from 30 minutes ago.
No, but I want to watch it now.
Yeah, it's actually not bad. But yeah, it's very strange to see a movie that depicts me.
Yeah.
But I was not even like consulted about anything.
Yeah.
So they're almost like, you know, monetizing my appearance, even though they didn't monetize it very well. They made very little money. But like, can you imagine someone monetizing your appearance on your behalf, making money off of you, and they don't even
I
consult
can't
you?
even imagine, dude. Like,
Yeah.
but you know what's crazy? The reason I asked what you thought of the Social Network is like when I watched the Social Network, I was like very inspired.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think they try to depict him as kind of like an ass. But like I was like, I want to be like that dude, you know? Like you know, I was like very inspired. So that's why like I'm curious. Obviously, I think Social Networks.
That wasn't the movie that inspired my love for entrepreneurship. If I had to pin it down to one movie, I think it would be Pirates of Silicon Valley.
Oh, that one is.
Did you ever
really
watch
good.
that?
Yeah. Older one.
It was like made for TV,
Yeah.
TNT movie about Apple Computer.
Yeah.
And it started at the beginning and ended right when Steve Jobs came back to Apple. And he did this presentation with like Bill Gates where they announced the partnership
together, right? But
Microsoft was like funding Apple basically to rescue them from bankruptcy. And so you had the huge Bill Gates towering above the Steve Jobs.
Interesting. But you know,
so yeah, that movie inspired me. I was like, I want to be in a garage. I love that. They're just so scrappy. That was what I looked up to.
The thing is, like, for me, that was a little bit too before my like it seemed like to be before my reality. You know what I mean? Like they were like in the 70s and like
they weren't writing software.
Yeah, it was like very hardware driven. And then Social Networks, like I would know how to do, like I would know what code to write.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To do this. Like versus that was like it seemed like so long ago.
Yeah.
A little bit.
There were software aspects, like they showed them coming up with fonts, right? Like fonts were not a thing until the Macintosh.
Totally.
And, you know, he was like arguing with his team. He's like, we've got to have the fonts. I don't care if it's going to be delayed. It can't be delayed. And we have to have all these fonts in there. And that's always inspirational. You wonder how fonts got into machines. And
the thing that I wonder is like, you know, if you get something like Dumb Money, which is, you know, to be fair, you guys weren't the focus at all. You know, it was like 1 or 2 scenes or whatever.
Yeah. 7 minutes of screen time.
Yeah.
They had all the shirtless scenes though. It was just like an interlude of like me shaving at the sink.
You know, I watched it. The thing I did get right is like they got your accent very well.
My mannerisms were close.
Your mannerisms were good. And the other thing that I thought when I saw it is like I had just seen the show Pam and Tommy, and it is the same guy that does Tommy.
Hey, that's not the worst.
It's like, you know, the drummer of Motley Fool. And then I realized I watched Gossip Girl growing up, and the same guy was in Gossip Girl too.
Oh,
yeah.
I hadn't seen any of those movies. I didn't know who he was, but he's a good-looking guy.
Yeah, no,
so I'm not complaining.
Could be
Pam
worse.
and Tommy, and I think he was also Donald Trump, where he's playing Donald Trump in the.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you know, your wife told me that she thought, you know, if one day, this is before Dumb Money, that Adam Driver should play you one day.
I think he would do a good job.
I think Adam Driver would do it. Yeah.
That would be in like the Oscar-winning version of the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll save him.
Exactly.
I love
the one they consult you for.
Did you know that I tried to film the beginnings of Robinhood and make a documentary out of it?
Really?
Yep.
And
you can still see the trailer for it on Kickstarter.
Really?
Yeah, I think it was called Market 2.0.
Dude, I'm definitely watching this.
Yeah, well, we never released the movie, but you can watch the trailer.
Yeah.
I think the trailer is pretty good.
Yeah.
So basically, I had a friend at UCLA who was a film person.
Yeah.
And I had this brilliant idea. Well, nobody thought it was brilliant at the time, but I think in hindsight, it was brilliant. I wanted to record Robinhood from the beginning to doing something great. And so I found this guy from grad school who agreed to do the project. He had just done like Ann Richards, who was a famous like Texas politician. She was like very loud, boisterous woman, governor of Texas, I think. So he'd done a documentary about her that was actually pretty good. So he came and hired some Stanford students to film us. They followed us around like the office, coding and stuff. And And then he had to raise money for the whole project. Like, these people have to eat, and he had to hire people. So we put it on Kickstarter, and it didn't meet its goal. So we had like a $10,000 goal. I think we raised $3,000. We're like, the people don't want this. We've got to shut this thing down.
Oh my God. That's so funny. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I always really like the idea of capturing that, right? I think it's good to capture, and people should see it so that they can understand the creative process. I love movies about startups.
Yeah, no, me too.
Startup.com. Have you ever seen that one?
No, I haven't seen that one.
Oh, you should check it out. It's about a New York-based startup. So an entrepreneur builds a startup to automate like parking ticket collection or something on behalf of the city. That was the business. It was something really boring and like civic technology.
I love these startup shows. I watched all of them. I thought that the worst one, the kind of, there's 3 that came out. I think We Crashed, The Bad Blood or something, and then the Uber one.
The Uber one
was the
super
worst.
pumped.
I couldn't even finish that.
I couldn't finish that. Yeah.
The We Crashed one is amazing.
I thought that was
Jared
good.
Leto like crushed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He did well. Yeah, that was an interesting movie. I got to know Adam Newman after that.
Oh, really? After
the movie, I met him and
I never met him actually.
Hung out with him a little bit. Yeah.
That's
great human being. I mean, it's unfair to people who can get movies made about them, and I think he got hit hard by the media.
We Crashed one,
great human being.
The thing that I thought it was better than the Uber one, because the Uber one is like, oh wow, this guy's an asshole. Like, there's no aspect that was like interesting, And I know Travis, like, he's an awesome guy. He's like super interesting guy, and I don't know Adam, but like, I watched We Crash, and I was like, oh yeah, like, this guy deserves this. But the other half, I was inspired. Like, he was like so good. You know what I mean? Like, it evokes that
charismatic.
Yeah, it evokes that feeling of like ambivalence that shows like the genius and at the same time the flaws. I think that was like, much more interesting and like very interesting.
Yeah, sure.
I'm curious, like, so we're talking about the characters and what do you think about them? Like, did you know, like, was like Warren Kitty, like, you already knew about his existence when all that stuff happened?
I had no idea.
You had no clue, right?
No clue.
Did you did you even know about the traders? Like, were they like?
Yeah. So I knew about Wall Street Bets because I basically followed when everyone would mention Robinhood, and if we were like growing in a forum, I'd follow that forum.
Yeah.
Right? And early days I contributed a little bit, but then that became difficult because we're regulated. And all of my communications are tracked and like recorded and everything. So of course had to stop all of that stuff, which was unfortunate because when I was younger, I loved hopping on the forums. But I found out about Wall Street Bets from very early on. Robinhood and Wall Street Bets kind of grew at the same time, and all of the traders on there basically used Robinhood. So I wouldn't know about it. But yeah, I wasn't really that familiar with the whole Roaring Kitty thing. I knew that GameStop was like being talked about. That started in December and escalated in January. But no, I never heard of them. I didn't know anything about the individual Redditors.
Yeah, that's like...
And he didn't even use Robinhood, actually.
Really?
So usually the ones that use Robinhood, they make funny videos, and I get to kind of know
You know what he used? Like, E-Trade?
He's using E-Trade. Yeah.
Wow. Interesting. That's so crazy that like you didn't even know about.
Never heard about it.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a weird thing to me, to be honest. I don't know, like, people follow this person as if they're a god, right? And
I never even understood like what is that, it's like they're saying, like, why did they even follow this person? What was the...
Yeah, I mean, Matt Levine. Do you ever read Matt Levine's newsletter? Yeah, he's got a very nice newsletter. One of the posts from a couple weeks ago basically said there's 2 people in this world that can tweet and have the ability to move a stock by whenever they want, just with a tweet. And it's, Keith Gill and Elon Musk. So essentially he was making the argument that this guy had a money printing algorithm on his hands, right?
Yeah.
And he could use it appropriately. And that, he might have been trading in some kind of ways to make money off of this whole thing. If you knew that every time you would tweet and a stock would go up, what sort of strategies could you employ to take advantage of the situation? Anyway, that's the content of the Matt Levine article. But yeah, my philosophy about this stuff is you don't need to follow people for trading inspiration. Like everyone has the power to do that themselves. You have the tools. Like you should be making your own decisions entirely. So it was always strange to me that, so many people would follow a person in trading.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting concept to me too. And
Yeah, like I never really wanted to be a member of some club like that. It
yeah,
almost feels like, oh, we're now this club of people that trade the same way.
I remember the first time that, we talked about some of the stuff with the trading and stuff like that. You were like, look, only like 5% of Robinhood users or something, or X% of the time. I don't remember what the number was, like trade very actively. A lot of them are more passive investors and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
I did used to say that a lot.
Yeah, and now like you guys built a lot for the active traders, right? Like
Yeah, like
what was that journey like?
at some point I just realized, why am I like being defensive and apologizing about this thing and explaining it by minimizing it? Like, people are like, "Oh, well, your customers are trading options." And I was saying, "Oh, no, it was only a small amount of our customers."
Yeah,
But the reality is, yeah, we serve active traders. We're in the active trader technology market and we want to get to number 1 in market share. So it's just much
yeah,
more authentic to be like,
it's what it is.
yeah, maybe it's 5%. I wouldn't have a problem if it was like that team should be motivated to grow that percent as much as possible because we're going to win the active trader market.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And if it grows, we're going to capture all of that growth. At least that's the mentality. I mean, I don't know if that sounds, compliance might think that that's promissory or something, but yeah.
Yeah, they're not
We're in the
perfect.
active trader market. We aim to win that market, and we want to build the best tools for active traders, whether they're trading options, futures, equities, crypto.
Yeah,
Number 1 in market share in every category.
yeah, and I agree. It feels like very authentic. It is a big part of the business model too, right? Like you guys grew a lot with them. I think it does definitely. It's a huge market, right? Like I remember
Yeah.
in Brazil growing up, man. Like one of the kind of like saddest things about that country is that there is no active trading,
Yeah.
because like there's not a big, you get so much money from fixed income because you get
Yeah.
13% a year, so if you're making 13% a year, let's say 7% inflation, let's say 6% net of inflation, there isn't a lot of like incentive to like
Yeah.
trade. And then the mentality that you have growing up is that risk is bad, you
Yeah.
know
Well,
that
you
like,
guys had the Bovespa, right?
yeah, we have Bovespa. Yeah, exactly. But like my mom, I used to growing up is like, oh, if you invest in stocks, you're dumb,
Oh, wow.
because like you're gonna lose all your money because it's like a casino.
Yeah, I mean, my parents were like very encouraging of stocks, and partly that was because hyperinflation in Bulgaria.
Yeah, in Brazil
We
too.
saw our parents, my parents, grandparents, their pensions get devalued to basically nothing,
Yeah,
which is the real problem with inflation. I mean, if you have loans, it makes those more attractive, but also your pensions become worthless.
totally. So for me, like, seeing coming to the US and seeing people like valuing taking risk and investing in businesses, right? Like that's what drove me to be here,
Yeah.
and I think Robinhood obviously like does a huge job by like allowing way more people to participate in that economy.
For you, it's amazing that you were so young. Like how you're still in your 20s, right?
I'm 28, yeah.
You're 28. And you started doing businesses when you were a
I
teenager,
was
right?
14, yeah. Yeah.
14
Yeah.
before you made your first dollar.
First dollar at 13.
First dollar with software. You were selling software.
Yeah, I was selling online games or kind of items inside an online game that I built.
Oh, you built the game.
No, it was kind of like copy of a game. So basically there's this like MMORPG, I think is massive multiplayer.
Massive multiplayer.
Yeah, massive multiplayer. Like World of
Massively
Warcraft vibe,
multiplayer. Yeah.
called Ragnarok. So I built like pirate servers for it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
To
then
serve the game.
so basically the original game was a subscription.
Yeah.
So there's this community of people that were building like basically a copy of the game, but you could use the same client in your computer, but instead of like connecting to a server
Oh,
from
nice.
the original one, you could connect to like a different server.
Okay.
And it was like
so
a
you're a
repli-
pirate.
Yeah, I was a pirate
Yeah.
basically. And then I did a freemium model. You could play for free and sold items inside the game.
Virtual goods.
Yeah, virtual goods. Yeah.
How did people pay?
They paid with boletos in Brazil, which is like kind of like a non-real time payment form that you pay at like a.
But it's not a virtual
supermarket.
good. They paid with real
They
currency.
pay with real money and then got a virtual good. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, like my first business, I was burning CDs for people. So I was also a pirate. But
Oh, really?
yeah, I would like download MP3s off of Napster and burn CDs and sell them for $10.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, Napster didn't get. We got Kazaa. That was the thing that we had.
I had that too.
Yeah. That was the one that was popular in Brazil.
Yeah.
Getting into the more. Now you're building the business, and when did you meet your wife? Which year?
I met my wife in early 2012.
So like right at the beginning
January.
of Robinhood.
Before Robinhood started. We
Robinhood's
had a
13?
vague idea for it. Robinhood, like we got the idea in 2012. We incorporated the entity probably late 2012, early 2013.
Yeah.
And then basically we filed the regulatory application in 2012, got approved 2013, and announced the waitlist December of 2013. So it's been about 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah. But then, like the exact moment when we started is hard to pin down because these licensing and launches take so long.
It's a pain. So you met your wife 2012.
Yeah.
And you guys started dating kind of and tell me about that a little bit. I think that's something that's like not talked about a lot, is like how much having like a stable partner helps with this stuff,
Yeah.
Like how do you think it influenced you in Robinhood, having like a stable relationship and having your wife and all that?
It helped me in a lot of ways. Some direct. I mean, I just do it in the fact that I really enjoy spending time with her. So that was amazing. I find her ambitious. Like at the beginning, I was really impressed by her ambition and kind of her story because she lost a parent to cancer when she was pretty young. And so she was motivated to, when I met her, she was doing cancer research. So she was motivated to do something about that, right? And yeah, I mean, we just became very close very quickly in 2012. And, I wasn't really looking for a relationship myself because I was a young guy, right? And I just thought that
your options,
I would have fun.
Yeah.
I just moved from New York. New York's a very fun city for a young single person.
Yes.
As maybe you can imagine. Yeah. And so, I was 25. I just turned 25, 24, turning on 25. But, we fell in love and we got very close and, got married a couple years later. And I think that if I had to sort of like think about the impact on the business, it was almost like moving from New York to Palo Alto. Like our first business we built in New York, there was a bar on the first floor of my apartment, which also served as our office. The bar was called the Lit Lounge, and it was like a hipster underground kind of really cool scene. Open till 4 a.m. every night. People would be like smoking cigarettes in the basement. And so you do your work, but there would be some distractions. You go to the Lit Lounge a couple times a week.
Yeah.
Till 4 a.m. And after a couple of years, it's just a drag on you. Like you can't push super hard with work and be doing any of that stuff. So I found that like New York was fun personally, but there were too many distractions. And when I figured out that I really needed to be all in and focused on work if we're going to be successful, it just became really bad to work there, I think. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to be in San Francisco. And I was really keen to do that. When I moved to San Francisco, I was like, everyone was moving their companies to the city at that point. You guys were based in the city. Partly I was like, San Francisco doesn't feel like a real city to me compared to New York.
Yeah.
Sorry if you're a San Francisco fan.
I'm not, as you know.
But yeah, it just wasn't a real city. And there was no Uber. It was hard to get around at night. So I was like, I'm going to leave San Francisco and go to a really nice suburb where I can focus on my work. And the great thing about down here is there's nothing to do.
Dude, yeah.
Everything closes at 9. and you have to work really hard to like find something to do if you really wanted to. It's not easy. So you just kind of put in a good day of work, go home, go to sleep in your quiet home and work again in the next day. And you're
Yeah.
not getting hungover. Your workforce isn't like going to bars that much. So I think it's a good environment to be creative.
I'm very pro down here, as you know. I think San Francisco, my opinion is that this like it has all the downsides of the cities with
Yeah.
none of the upsides.
Yeah. Totally.
In terms of work and strategy. It has a lot of stuff going on. It's just not that fun. New York is like there's a lot of stuff going on, but it's like really fun.
Yeah. And easy to get around.
Yeah, exactly. The subways and everything. Well, besides all the problems San Francisco has today. But so then, yeah, you're just like, you just felt just very focused, right? Like being married and
Yeah.
stable, and like you could just like go to work, do your thing, come back, go to work, do your thing, come back.
Yeah. I have like very few things that I do in my life. I try to cut most everything out. It's working, you know, uh, yeah, pretty much working. And I have probably 70 to 80 hours a week at Robinhood because I've had to like probably work more as we make more progress. But that minimum, and whenever I see my kids, I get to see my kid not that much during the week, unfortunately, but usually like I have time for Saturday to hang out with them.
Totally. And dude, I think that's something that like, I'm a TikTok user.
Are you?
Yeah, I am.
See, I think that's where I know I'm like old. I just don't get it.
Dude,
I don't like it.
I spend enough time, and but there's like you get served stuff, and like sometimes I get served kind of like the hustle culture. Those guys
Yeah.
who like like I wake up at like 5 a.m. and I do 2 cold plunges and I read 6 books by the time
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like 12. And
Is that like 5 a.m. club stuff?
yeah. And it's funny that like, when I talk to, our friends that are like CEOs and stuff, they all work a lot, but like no one is like bragging about it. You know what I mean? And like kind
Yeah.
of, it's just part of what you do, it's just like kind of, you just got to do it.
Yeah, see, I can't. I don't like the idea of machine learning using my behavior to serve me better ads. So I just avoid as many of those products as possible.
I get it.
Except for Twitter. It's hard to avoid that for work, but
Yeah,
try to for personal stuff.
I get it. But obviously everyone knows the upsides of kind of being like, a CEO of a public company. There's obviously the wealth, there's like all the stuff you get invited to, et cetera, et cetera. Like, what what are the downsides of it that bother you the most?
I think the sacrifice that you make is I don't really take vacation. Like it doesn't work for me. Not from like a hustle standpoint. Like I've tried taking vacation in the past and I'm so kind of like I can't really stop thinking about all the things that I have to do at work. So if I'm away from, my Slack or my work phone,
It's hard to disconnect.
then I just start worrying about stuff.
Yeah.
So what I found works better for me is just to work a little bit every day and stay connected and try to block out chunks of each day to see my family. So if I'm going on vacation or going on a work trip more often, when I go on a work trip, I just kind of take my family around. Like when we went to Italy recently, my family was there and we took the weekend to explore Rome and to do those things. But other than that, don't really do much.
So you think that like lack of disconnection, being able to disconnect, is the thing that kind of bothers you the most?
Yeah, you're always a little bit responsible for something, right? There's like the responsibility of work, and I also have responsibility of being a parent, right? But like when you're a kid, you're not responsible for anything really, until you get your first pet or something like that. You can't have that feeling of just like being completely disconnected and not responsible for anything.
What are the upsides? What are the ones you like the most?
I really like building stuff. I mean, if you have resources with which to build stuff.
What does that
that's
feel
really
like?
exciting.
When you're talking about it, like build, like, is it like, wow, like now I have this idea, I have like 10 people I can just like throw at that problem, and like then it gets built into reality.
Yeah, I think that the dream for me would be the ability to like have an idea and get to building stuff very, very quickly for every idea. And I think this is something that you have to have a big company with a lot of resources to do. Because when you're a small company and you don't have any resources, you kind of have to be very focused on one thing. But like when you have a lot of resources, you can do more ambitious things that are bigger, or you can do lots of things in parallel, right? Assuming you have enough leaders to run things. So I think that's sort of like the special quality of a big company. You just have a lot of resources, a lot of chips to deploy, so you can do more ambitious things.
You know, the one I really like of the upsides is this ability to, whenever you're interested in a topic, it's not hard to get to like the best person in the world that
Oh
knows
yeah.
about it. For me, that's like the best part.
Yeah, you're probably better at utilizing that stuff than me. I always have to remind myself that, we have the ability to do that.
Yeah. Because like every time you're interested in something, you're like, you read about it, etc. But then like you can go and like meet someone that's like been thinking about it for like 20 years or something.
Yeah, or if you have a problem with some company, you
Exactly.
can call the CEO, right? It's like, oh,
Exactly.
hey man, like I'm having an issue with your product here.
Yeah, totally. And I think the downsides, you're right. The like kind of like stress. I think my co-founder Pedro, he says it in a way is like a lot of times CEOs, a lot of your life, personal life is just optimizing around stress. You know, you're
Yeah.
just like, okay, how can I like be less stressed around my entire life?
Yeah, I think for me, I think about it as distractions, getting rid of distractions, whether it's alcohol or spending time at bars or clubs until 4 a.m., like getting rid of all those distractions and actually being in one of the great things about stopping drinking, maybe you felt this as well. I would have a bottle of wine on Friday night or something. Even if I wasn't going super hard, I'd wake up Saturday and I would feel a little
Yeah,
groggy,
the
kind of
sleep
hungover
is
the entire day.
yeah.
And then when I stop drinking, hey, Saturday I wake up and I feel great.
Great.
Maybe
Yeah.
I'll go for a run, I'll come home, do some work, but it's
So
like I don't lose a whole day.
but what's your guilty pleasure? What is the thing that like you're like, oh, I know this is not like hyper productive, but like I really like it.
I like playing chess on my phone.
Okay.
In fact, actually, I think I'm reaching this point at which I don't want to do that anymore. I'm getting too addicted to it. And I like deleted the chess app, but I'm now very focused on actually being away from my phone multiple times a day. Um, the thing that I'm trying to do is not spend as much of my time thinking about the future, like what I'm going to do an hour from now or 6 hours from now or 5 years from now, and not ruminate on the past. Then this was actually easier to fix. I was more easily able to fix ruminating on the past, but just think about the here and now, as much as possible to the greatest degree possible. And I think looking at your phone and having it be available takes you out of that so much.
100%.
You're always thinking about like the news that they're talking about or some app that you have to check.
Or Slack or whatever, and what people.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally get it.
So I journal every night. I journal on pen and paper. I try to do it by candlelight, like the most natural
Oh,
setting
really?
possible.
That's interesting.
And I've been trying to like, I'm really bad at this, but my goal is to like really like go to sleep and wake up and have that period between going to bed and waking up being
No
like
phone.
pristine. Yeah. Like
That's-
phone in another room.
I want to evolve to that. Like I still watch TV before going to sleep, but like I
Yeah.
still feel it's
That's I think better because it's less.
yeah. No, I definitely don't
interactive.
look at my phone because otherwise I don't sleep. But TV still is. But like I would like to get to a non-screen kind of thing before going to sleep.
I feel like I've been trying to do this since 2019 and I was making good progress. But like when the GameStop stuff happened, my phone was in another room. And so like I didn't wake up until way late in the situation.
Yeah.
And my coworkers were trying to get to me. It was in the middle of COVID and they couldn't really get to me. And at that point, ever since then, I sleep with like two phones next to me.
Yeah, in
So-
case someone needs to get to you, like they can.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like on the part of downside. It's it sucks, right? That like
My English teacher follows me on, or we're friends on Facebook. And when she had this big thing of the only thing you should worry about when you're speaking is whether you do these pregnant pauses like
yeah.
and I do them all the time. So when I did my congressional hearing, she actually sent me a Facebook message. She's like, I thought you used ums too much.
Oh really? That's so
So-
funny. How was that experience, dude?
The worst part about it was doing it remotely. I thought doing it remotely was really lame. And I was actually trying to make it so that it was in person. But I almost felt like I didn't get the experience just because it was
Yeah.
on a computer screen. I wanted to be in the actual Congress on the table, going through, getting like the real visceral experience.
Yeah.
That
No,
was my biggest disappointment. Not saying I want to go back again.
let's hope you
I
don't.
wouldn't want to go in front of Congress necessarily. That wasn't the most fun, but I would have preferred it to be live in person. I think it would have made for a better experience for everyone, even the people watching.
Dude, so describe how was the GameStop stuff when it happened from your perspective, like your life, your household, like what was happening in your life?
It was like all fight or flight. I was nonstop on trying to
So like
just
what was the
resolve
first thing that
issues.
happened? You were sleeping, you didn't hear the phone.
Well, so what was happening in general was there was pandemonium at Robinhood for probably the entire month leading up to that. And it had nothing to do with the NSCC deposit requirements. We were just growing like crazy. So our biggest fear was to have a system-wide outage due to load, which we had 9 months earlier, and it was all over the news and really kind of harmed perceptions of us, even among our customers. So the number one thing that was on our mind was we don't want to be down again. We've got to
Don't go
serve
down.
customers throughout all of this. And it was kind of scary because the trading was going parabolic. So every day was like double the volume of the previous day. And some of those days, including GameStop, Jan 28th, we had like 20 billion in traded volume, 20 billion in notional volume per day in equities, 20 million plus trades, like bonkers numbers. I think that was more than the entire industry would get in a typical day the year prior, right? Um, so we had to scale up massively. There were a lot of things that we had to do very quickly while we were serving customers. And so the biggest thing was just making that work. We were the number one app on the App Store overall for about a week in that time period, like higher than TikTok
Further.
and Instagram, which was probably a scary level of growth for a financial company. And remember, the regulators don't really want financial companies to grow that fast.
Nope.
If you're a bank, they really,
They cap your growth.
yeah, they cap your growth. You shouldn't be growing that fast. So for us, that period of hyper growth was just like unprecedented in our space. So we were just worried about all of the downsides of that. But at the same time, I was very happy, I care about growth, and we were growing really fast, and
Yeah,
we were
totally.
number one on the App Store.
It sounds amazing.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, but then if the growth is too much, the company could die.
Yeah.
So you're kind of teetering on the edge there. So those were really the two emotions. And you can imagine if you're kind of in between your company just dominating an industry forever and dying.
And like you're like, okay, it could go either of these ways, right? Like a very high volatility.
I was pretty amped up. Yeah, I was amped up the whole time. I did not sleep at all, right? There were probably a couple hours of very uneasy sleep every single night. And that went on for months. And then we went right into having our IPO in the middle of COVID.
Yeah, that's like crazy.
Personal life was pretty tough. I mean, I was just.
Did you have to move out for a bit?
Well, so people always mention that. Yeah, I did stay at a hotel about a week after the events of this, but it wasn't like I fled my house. I was at my house that Thursday, the entire day, and Friday. And I think it was very important for me to get the job done and do everything and not move. But, after Friday afternoon, the worst part of the whole crisis was over, and we had the weekend that actually kind of capped everything. I had just been
Thank God it wasn't on Monday.
Right. Yeah. Then you would have had. Well, Monday was the volume was growing like crazy too. But yeah, I just wanted like a change of scenery. We had been cooped up in that little house, and my kids are running around. I'm doing all these video calls with CNBC and CNN, and my daughter is like playing with her toys. My wife's upstairs trying to not like get in the middle of the video. It was a pretty small rental house. I actually never bought a house until 2020. We were just renting the whole time because we just wanted to not have the headache. And then after that, I was like, you know what? I just want to go to a place and change scenery and have a little vacation away from COVID.
Yeah, like staycation.
Exactly.
Yeah. I get it. I get
But
it.
yeah, I did battle and win the battle at home first. So Thursday and Friday, I didn't really move, and
What did your wife think of the whole situation? Selena thing?
she was terrified.
Yeah.
She's like, I, I told her to turn off her Twitter because she had Twitter at that point, and people were just blasting her on Twitter.
Oh, dude, that sucks.
Like, tell your husband to, stop siding with the hedge funds
Oh
and
my god, so many
Ken
conspiracies.
Griffin. And
What was the worst conspiracy theory?
there was one conspiracy theory that the White House told me to do it.
No.
Yeah. So someone wrote a fake note and posted it on Reddit, and they were like, "Hey guys, software engineer Robinhood here, not like management or anything, just really deep in the technical shit. I just overheard
I
Vladimir,
remember this. Yes. It had like
CEO
spelling
Vladimir.
mistakes, right? Or something?
CEO Vladimir was on the phone with the White House, and they told him to shut it down."
Oh my god.
And then
Sequoia or something.
yeah,
right?
and then Sequoia Capital was also given the directive via the White House to force me to shut it down. And this thing was like Justin Kahn tweeted it.
Yeah.
And then Sequoia issued a statement. Sequoia was like, "We did not communicate to Robinhood or Joe Biden about the GameStop situation." And, I still see this thing. Like, there's some non-zero proportion of people that think that the White House put me up to this.
Oh my god. Well, there's still people who believe the earth is flat too. So,
Yeah. So there's some weird shit. I think if you serve so many customers, you're bound to see some eccentric customers out there. But yeah, there's so many people that just like don't know what happened. It's kind of complicated to understand.
It's
And
very
so
technical.
It's technical, and they haven't even heard about Robinhood since GameStop.
Yeah.
Like when I was in New York this last time, I did an interview with Fox Business. And, I felt pretty good about it. We usually go on like the more, CNBC's is kind of a regular show. Fox Business has a completely different audience. Like they tend to be more conservative. And a lot of the audience and even the people there, they're like, "Hey, I didn't even know Robinhood was around still."
You're joking.
Or like not quite to that level, but I heard about GameStop.
That's the only
What
thing
have
I
you
heard
guys-
since then.
What have you guys done since then?
Yeah.
And then I just realized, wow, there's a whole giant proportion of America that I'm not even reaching.
Yeah.
And they still think there's some collusion narrative. So it's made me learn a lot about the media, and also made me learn how difficult it is to just get a message out to all corners of people that need to hear it.
From what we're like, if you're like reflecting now on it and you're writing back to Vlad at that time, like what were the learnings for you?
I think one thing that I've sort of like thought about a lot since is I had this urge to go to the press very, very soon after the event. And I was actually, the pressure that I was feeling was that I should be communicating more and sooner. Like we waited too long to issue a statement or whatever. And I wanted to make sure that that statement was as authentic as possible and not legal corporate speak.
Which is like I think for people who don't know how it is, like it's so hard to get your comms and policy and legal lawyers to not make everything you say corporate speak, right? Like,
Right. And that situation was so intense, like the whole GameStop situation. So if in hindsight, what I would have done is taken my time before doing an interview, had it be a more long form, sit down, higher quality one in a sense. Not to take anything away from Sorkin or Cuomo, who interviewed me that day. I think they had great interviews and it was very topical. But I remember Oprah had interviewed Harry and Meghan, right? And they were in the middle of a lot of controversy. They just did one interview and everyone watched it.
Yeah.
And they were able to get their message out, whether
With
you
the
agree with
nuance
it or
that was
not.
required.
Oprah interviewed them in this beautiful garden. It was just very watchable. I remember watching it and falling asleep to it. But in hindsight, I probably would have done that, waited longer, which would have probably built up the anticipation. And then I could have done one interview that maybe 100 million people watched, and I'd be able to get my message across very, very clearly. but I kind of did like little things here and there. My message wasn't that tight. I felt the need to do it quickly, and I feel like I rushed it in some sense because I was balancing getting it right with communicating fast.
Yeah.
So if I had to do it again, the company would probably like communicate more frequently in a corporate manner. Like they just let people know what's going on, but it can be corporate,
Yeah, but then,
whatever.
yeah, the comms team does it.
But yeah, it's on behalf of the company. The company is telling you factually what's going on with pretty low latency. And then later on, I do an interview where I provide more color, but have that interview be much more prepared, where I didn't have as much sleep. I mean, when I did that interview, I'd probably been up 72 hours straight.
And I remember you telling me this, and I thought it was super interesting that like since 2021, 2022, 2023, you changed a lot as a leader inside the company, right?
Yeah.
Tell me about that journey.
I think I changed a lot as a person. The hardest stretch of time I had at Robinhood was probably not GameStop, but it was probably the couple of years after that. Post IPO 2022. I mean, you guys went through it. The market changed. Interest rates went up. For us, trading went down because when interest rates are up, people just like holding their money in risk-free bonds or
You
cash.
get 5% for doing nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. And they were buying less stock. This was exacerbated by the fact that stocks were also declining in price. All of the growth
double whammy.
technology stocks. And since we were a growth technology stock, our stock was declining quite a bit too. So all of this brought together made it a very stressful year. We had to lay off multiple rounds of people. We turned over probably 70% of our staff in
And then at
2022.
some point, like if you guys remove the cash you have in the bank, like it was at some point it was like worth very little, right?
Yeah, close to zero.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is crazy if you think about it. Like it's probably one of the
Under
most,
$1 billion for sure.
it's probably one of the
enterprise
most
value.
obvious trades of all time would have been buying Robinhood back then, looking back. But
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
but going through it, it sucks.
if you look at enterprise value, I think just in the past year, it's like more than 10x, like
Yeah.
14x or something,
Yeah.
which has been nice. Yeah, but yeah, it was painful. Stock was in the shitter. We had to lay people off. Our entire business strategy had to fundamentally change, and it was painful. But if I'm looking back on it, it was probably the best time that I could have gone through as a leader. Like that's what I remember looking back. It was really, really hard, and we kind of pushed through it. And I'm still alive
What's
on
the
the other
before
side.
and after, right? Like describe what would be the Vlad before and Vlad after.
I think before, I mean, as a person, I cared a lot what other people's impression of me was. Like I wanted to be perceived as like this humble sort of servant leader almost that did everything they could for the benefit of others and really cared about employees and did everything to serve them, cared about customers, wants to serve customers. So it's just sort of like give me more work and I'll do the work. Almost like a camel, right? Like give me the load. I want to bear a heavier load. That's my
Yeah.
purpose in life. I think over the past couple of years, probably starting around the time of GameStop, it clicked for me that there's things that I want to do and I should just like focus more on bending the world to the will of what I want to do and not really care as much of what people think about me. Like, why do I give a shit what people think of the car that I'm driving or,
Yeah.
criticize what I'm doing and just do what I think is right, drive whatever car I want to drive. And I felt myself getting a little bit older too. So, there were things that I was avoiding mainly because of the optics of it, like driving a fast car or traveling to a nice hotel, being very clear about what I want to people. Like, I don't like this, stop doing that, or I don't like this is what I'm going to do.
How would you think like someone that reports to you would describe the change? Like from
I mean, the reality is I think we had to change a lot of team members during that time. And I had a very large executive team going through IPO. And now, like, the C-suite is smaller at Robinhood, but my number of reports is way larger. So we ended up going to a GM structure, which, I mean, corporate reorganization is one of the few things the CEO can actually do. So there's a big corporate reorganization, although hopefully your viewers can appreciate that. Although it sounds kind of lame, right? Corporate
No, it's
reorganization.
huge. Like you have like, people's goals are very different than they were before.
Totally.
The way they organize. Like if you have like how many employees now?
2,500-ish.
Yeah,
maybe a
so
little
the
bit less.
2,500 people, they all need to like organize themselves in some way.
Yeah.
And like you're changing the way they organize, they communicate, they know what success is, right? Like that's what a corporate reorganization is.
Yeah, and my preference is really towards centralizing responsibility, having one person that like owns a project, and it makes it easier to manage, right? Rather than, I think for some people functional works better because they love being the fulcrum of like cross-functional decision making.
Yeah.
But I would
so
rather people run and have resources. And
now you don't have like one necessarily like head of product or head of design. You have like,
we have a head of design actually and a head of core product. Yeah, I have about 15 directs, so it's more kind of in the Jensen Huang style of things, rather than Elon Musk, I guess. But Elon Musk has multiple companies, so
yeah, he
his
has a lot of
situation gets-
CEOs reporting to him almost.
Yeah, I think to answer your question, what reports would say about how it changed, I think there were some folks, like our chief legal officer and chief financial officer, have been there for a long time. Dan Gallagher, who's our chief legal officer, was a former SEC commissioner. So he's like subject matter expert, taught me so many things about like how to operate in the financial industry that I just didn't know before. Jason Warnick, who's our CFO, he was 20 years at Amazon, led investor relations. And that's another one of the great companies, right? We just have a ton of respect over pretty much every aspect about how that company is run. And I think they were really aligned with me philosophically about what type of company we want to build and having it be high standards, completely merit based, make it like as minimal bureaucracy as possible and like cut out the fat whenever we need to cut out an extra process. And I think there were a lot of other people that weren't into that and they naturally left. Or
do you think your role models or whoever you got advice from changed?
I've never really followed the advice of a singular person, but I don't know what your approach to this is. My approach is, I mean, I'd love to hear yours. Mine is I want to find people that are excellent at many things and try to replicate aspects of them and incorporate them into how we do things. So like the Jensen news about how he manages his team is really a great kernel. I think there's some magic in that, right?
Yeah.
I think it's extreme in a sense. I wouldn't want to replicate all aspects of it, but just hearing
There's something there, right? Of like what he's doing right.
Yeah, there's some aspect of like feedback should be public. And if I'm giving you feedback and you're a direct report, ideally we're in a situation where others can learn from that. And it's much more efficient because you should learn from like what your peers are doing right and doing wrong.
Yeah.
And then if you think about feedback can be delivered in front of other people, then you kind of get into this mode where you can just not have one-on-ones, right?
Did you already kill your one-on-ones?
I've gone through a few phases of not having any one-on-ones to like having a lot. And now I'm somewhere in the middle. So I have some one-on-ones, but I think the aspiration would be to just kill them. Yeah. I think that's the end state.
That's the end state.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really believe the excellence is domain specific. Thing that Bezos say that like there are some people that are like really, really good at something. Doesn't mean that everything that they do is really good. And I think the example I like is like, people looked at Google early on and thought that the secret was like the, the ball pits and the, and the corporate massages. And turns out what Google did right,
it created the space for
like they would have succeeded despite that, not because of that, right?
Exactly. And it's almost a form of degeneration because then startups copy it to try to copy the success.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't have that great of a business model. Like Google is pretty special in terms of like
we've had some hires from Google that were actually great and others that haven't worked out.
Yeah.
And I think the ones that haven't worked out by and large Google's such a great company with such a strong economic engine that they never had to deal with like struggle or constraint or having to cut costs.
Well, even once the CEO of Google told me that it's like really hard for businesses to go into lower margin businesses themselves.
Yeah.
It's like really hard.
Yeah. It's like if it's not printing money like ads, why do people care
bother?
about it? Yeah, exactly.
Why bother? Exactly. Anything you want to change now? We talked about what you changed in the past. Like anything you want to change for the future?
I think I have to continue on my journey of being fully in the present at every moment and not getting distracted by thinking about the near future or the distant past. So much of my ability to do things effectively is due to focus and being kind of at peace with myself that, I've been on a journey of dialing in my nutrition, my health, my sleep, not drinking alcohol, running a company and allocating resources. And I think like it's gotten me in touch with the very cerebral part of my brain, but the more spiritual part is suffering a little bit. So I think for Vlad in 2025, it would be get in touch with the more spiritual side of me.
I love that.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs was like extremely spiritual, and I think it made a huge difference in Apple, and
yeah,
he did in that hiatus.
And he was able to do that while running a high-tech company.
Exactly.
So I think that could improve on that for sure.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for coming. Thanks for listening to my conversation with Vlad Tenev. We'll be back next time with another look inside the minds of the biggest names in business. HD and HD is produced by me, Henrique in association with Pod People.